Thanks for staying tuned. Welcome back. Before the break, we were talking to Dr. Agbo Ebota, a family physician from our Abuja studios. Dr. Ebota, thank you for your time once again. Let's move now to something that is really affecting many of those, particularly trying to flee. And we have heard reports that quite a number of people have become casualties, not of bullets, not of the attacks in themselves, but of something called hypothermia, which I'm made to understand is a reaction caused by the severity of the weather, the cold weather. First of all, what is hypothermia and how does one get this?
Hypothermia, it's actually a compound word. Hypo, from the Latin word hypo, which means low, and thermia, from the Greek word, which means heat. So when the body temperature drops to below the normal ranges, you call that hypothermia. Typically, you would expect that the normal body temperature will be around 35 degrees Celsius to about 37.3. So if a temperature falls below 35 degrees Celsius, that is hypothermia. And it's important because the body needs normal body temperature to function. The body metabolism, the way your body operates, your breathing, your heart, your lungs, your organs, they need to function. They function best optimally within a particular range of temperature. And so once the body temperature begins to drop, your body sets up mechanisms to counter those effects. And it's not surprising that this is a major issue in this war, because in areas of Ukraine that we find some of our people, temperatures are as low as -2 to as low as -8 degrees centigrade. These are extremely cold weathers, because if you counterpose that against the present temperature today in Abuja, which is 38 degrees Celsius, you can only see how much of a problem in terms of what the weather poses for these people. And it's of significant implication health-wise, because low temperatures will not allow your body to function. And in the presence of low temperatures, what happens is that your body, you begin to lose heat from the person affected, or the person exposed will begin to lose heat from his or herself to the environment. And this heat loss can occur in several means, but it's important to point out clearly that most of this heat loss, as much as half of the heat loss, continues and is through a means we call a radiant or infrared heat loss. And you really won't see this infrared because they are very tiny waves that are not visible to the eye, but they are emitted from exposed surfaces. So from the head of the person, from any exposed, the hands and any exposed part of the body, the patient or the person affected is going to continue to lose heat. Apart from that, people would also lose heat when they breathe in cold air, warm it up in their chest and breathe it out. So they lose heat too. And when they come in contact with cold surfaces, generally is transmitted directly. But as the body temperature begins to drop as a result of this heat loss, your body is not going to sit quiet. It's going to start reacting, and all kinds of messages will be sent from the brain to all parts of the body to increase the production of chemicals that would aid the production of heat internally, to make your muscles also to start contracting. That's why you see patients or people who start shivering. All these measures are aimed at increasing the heat production in the body to reduce the rate at which it drops. But if you're in an environment where you are not removed from that environment and temperatures continue to be low, these mechanisms, after a while, they wane off, and they cannot meet, the production rate cannot meet the rate at which it's lost. And that's where hypothermia sets in. And all kinds of symptoms are expected. And the worst, obviously, is death.
Now, we have also heard from those who have experienced this, those who have left Ukraine, and as you pointed out, left for Poland, Hungary, and so on. Some of them having to endure 18-hour journeys, some of them on foot, in open trucks, in buses, and then when they get to the border, they have to join a very long line, which is out there in the open, and it is at that point that a lot of what you've described already, one can imagine, would set in. So I guess the question is, for someone who is in this kind of situation with -8 degrees, -5 degrees temperatures, it's not just about dressing warmly, is it? There is more to it than that. Because some of the visuals that were being shown while you were speaking had people fairly warmly dressed. I mean, some of them with exposed faces, but fairly warmly dressed, particularly the children. But it's not only about that, is it? So what does one do when you find yourself in this kind of situation? How do you prepare to counter this?
Well, indeed, there are several measures that can be put in place to reduce the incidence or the occurrence of hypothermia. While dressing is a significant factor, one needs to understand that even the mode of dressing is critical. Multi-layered dressing is what is advised, meaning that you have to put several layers of clothes. Now, it's not just just putting several layers of clothes. There are specific recommendations. If you have 3 layers of clothes, what we expect is that the inner layer is one that can absorb moisture. The middle layer is one that can insulate. So in the middle layer, you want to use things like wool or propylene. And then in the outer layer is something that is resistant to moisture. So multi-layer, but proper layering. Hands should be closed. Faces, head should probably also be closed. But in addition to that, one of the most potent intervention when you have exposure to weather conditions that are very low is to remove the affected people from that exposure. So we need to be able to get the people at the border to create enough infrastructure that will protect people who are waiting to be cleared by the Polish authorities to cross the border. So you just cannot put people in clothing and leave them in the open. You need to provide accommodation. You need to provide some form of home structure. You need to provide heating in these areas. Apart from that, you need to provide all other forms of supplements like opportunities for water bottles to heat up some old people who, despite this, and young children who, despite all of these measures, will still experience drop in temperature. And in addition to that, you also have to create you have to speed up the process of allowing people to cross over to the other side. And there also, you also have to provide medical care. There are people who, despite all of this measure, would fall victim to hypothermia. So you need to be able to have the medical infrastructure in place to identify these patients quickly and put in place interventions that will reduce their descent to severe or moderate hypothermia, which is almost associated with poor outcomes. Because by the time a patient is experiencing moderate or severe hypothermia, that means the temperatures are below 32 degrees Celsius. What happens is that the heart begins to slow down, the breathing begins to slow down, even within the cells. The cells, you can imagine that at low temperatures, the water is going to crystallize. So imagine this happening at the microcellular level. So what happens is that the functions, the metabolic functions, breathing, taking in air, your digestive system, your heart, everything begins to shut down. And at that point, one of the commonest cause of death for patients would usually be a cardiac arrest. And the problem with cardiac arrest in people who are hypothermic with body temperatures below 30 degrees Celsius is that you need to do cardiac resuscitations for longer periods than usual. So one of the things we've seen in this kind of scenario is that some people who have suffered cardiac arrest but are not dead are assessed as dead. So I can assure you that some people are actually still alive, but because they have descended to severe hypothermia and they are not responding to normal stimulus, they are considered as dead and have not been exposed to normal, adequate resuscitation. So those people are, so to speak, buried alive. So it's a significant problem, and some of these measures have to be very comprehensive. Infrastructure, medical infrastructure to take care of people, housing and heating services to ensure that people do not descend into hypothermia or exposed to weather conditions that increase that risk. Ensure that processing people faster at the border. I think the Polish authorities have to do a better job. They can't keep people for 48 hours. Processing has to be much faster. And then also, since the federal government has taken significant steps in evacuation, I think another window of opportunity to reduce, especially our compatriots over there, is to provide what you call anti-hypothermia kits. So what it means is that we should be able to, at this point in time, contact our embassy in Ukraine, embassy officials in Ukraine, who can enumerate Nigerians, precisely enumerate all Nigerians, and provide facilities for them.
Finally, before I let you go, Yes, but before I let you go, I wonder if, because usually when this kind of things get asked, we are told that medically there is a difference, particularly for African and African-based populations like Nigerians. And you've talked about the fact that in some instances, not knowing what to do when the crisis hits is part of our problem. Now, is there any medical reason why hypothermia would deal with an African in a different way from a Caucasian, for example? Is there any reason for that? And if so, in what particular way can that be tackled by the African in order to make, because a lot of the people who are involved in this movement, particularly fleeing, are Africans. They're from Ghana, they're from Nigeria, they're from South Africa, and so on. Basically, they're blacks. So is there anything that is peculiar to them that they need to watch out for? And how do you know, as a person, if you are about to go into hypothermic shock?
Well, there's nothing peculiar biologically speaking. All humans are humans. But what is peculiar socially speaking is that we have heard that some of our compatriots from the Negroid race, Black Africa, are not able to cross the border. Some of them were even barred from using trains all the way to the border. And on getting to the border, some of them were not put on the priority list for processing. So this is outright discrimination, and the federal government needs, I'm sure, is taking a position on that, and should let the Polish authorities know that they cannot continue to intimidate Nigerians, they cannot continue to expose Nigerians unnecessarily, and carry out any discriminatory activities against Nigerians, because this is completely unacceptable. So that's for that. So it's a problem with Africans dying. It's mainly a social problem. They are discriminated against at the border. Their opportunities are not as much compared to the Caucasian. So definitely human rights advocates need to come in here. The country needs to take a position. African Union needs to make a clear statement and send a clear message to the European Union, to the Polish authorities, to tell them that this is unacceptable and it has to change.
Well, the reports that we have indicate that mostly it is actually authorities in the Ukraine who are practicing what you've just described, and that, in fact, in Poland and Romania and Hungary and all the other countries, they've been far more welcoming of refugees. But I guess the key point is, how do you know, because that was the other leg of my question, how do you know when you're about to go into hypothermic shock?
Well, the first thing is that there are obviously about 3 stages of hypothermia: the mild, the moderate, and the severe. When you get to the moderate and the severe stage, you don't know. People around you, you would need help from people around you to tell you that, look, this is the situation. Because at that stage, even your mental, your reaction to stimulus, your mental ability, your judgment is all impaired. But at the mild stage of hypothermia, you would notice that probably your heart is beating faster, you're breathing much faster, and you are also shivering. In fact, shivering is the most visible symptom of hypothermia, because the body is trying to generate heat, so to speak. At that point, it's critical that the person affected either finds a way to warm his or herself up, remove him or herself from that environment as soon as possible, ensure that he gets proper clothing, so to speak. But it's important and critical that at the mild stage of hypothermia, you must take action. You can't sit around, because it's basically going to get worse. From the moderate to the severe stage, you would need some form of medical care. You may also need admission in the hospital for proper care. If not, you can experience all forms of poor outcomes, like cardiac arrest, which is one of the commonest cause of death in patients with hypothermia. So it's critical to differentiate between mild and moderate to severe hypothermia.
Thank you so very much, Dr. Agbo Ebota. The information that you've given could prove to be life-saving for many people, especially those who are watching this and who have relations who are trying to make their way out of there. So I thank you once again for joining us on the program.
Thank you. It's a pleasure.